Welcome to Refactor by Beth. Thank you again for having me and asking me to speak. Oh gosh, do me a favor. As soon as he opens his mouth, just throw something at him, if you will. Him, that guy right there. No, the chair next to you will be even better. He's a friend of mine. For the past 5 years, he's been showing up at all my talks for some reason, and he heckles me during my talks. So he enjoys that. But that's okay, though, because he's speaking tomorrow. I won't be here, but I'm going to assign someone to harass you as well. You're welcome. You're welcome. So good morning. My name is Homer Gaines, and I am a staff engineer for Google. We are a software development company. We do documentation, but I'm also their accessibility specialist. I've been doing accessibility now since 2001, and my background is in psychology with a focus in neurology. So throughout my career, I've been trying to figure out ways to actually marry the two because I still really enjoy psych and everything like that. And I figured out that with my skill set, I'm more beneficial at talking about and teaching about accessibility and how that affects the way that we have to build software. And as we know, 2020 was just really interesting with COVID showing up on the scenes. And we have this thing now called long COVID. In the news, you might hear it described as brain fog. Well, this brain fog actually can really play a huge part in the way that people use our applications that we develop. And a lot of businesses, developers, designers, just people in general are not paying attention or even aware of how those two avenues intersect. So that's what I'm going to speak with you about today. So we hear about accessibility in the companies. For all of you, who's all familiar with accessible development, accessible design, and so forth? All right. Your businesses support it, or is it something that you actually do? So, yes. Oh, you got a thumbs up? I love that part. Because usually it's like, yeah, our businesses, they think it's a waste of time or it's something that gets shoehorned in at the end of the project. So it's good. But still, a lot of people, ask this question, what is accessibility and why do we have to care about it? It's a brief history on it. 2022, these are the results of the WebAIM survey where they take the top 1 million websites, test them against the WCAG and other success criteria to see how they hold up as far as accessibility is concerned. 96.8 fail. These are just the home pages, 1 million websites. That's a lot. That's a lot of information, details that someone who uses assistive tech or may have other disabilities where they have to use assistive tech cannot even get to. It is not just a domestic initiative. This is global. There are 70 countries across the world that have some form of accessibility law on their books. And the good thing is, it all points back to the WCAG, Web Content Application Standards. 2.1 is the current one. 2.2 is going to be releasing, it's out for review right now, so they may be releasing it next year sometime, 2023 sometime. But right now we just have to adhere to 2.1, and the sweet spot that we aim for is level AA. There are 3 levels. Level single A, which is you're doing the bare minimum. AA, you're meeting many of the criteria that you're responsible for. AAA means that you're going above and beyond. There are some instances where you want to do AAA, like for instance, if the content on your website is a 12 pixel, you want to make sure that that font is legible or those words are perceivable to someone with low vision. So you'll want the contrast to actually meet AAA, which I believe is 7.1 even. But what a lot of people don't realize is that 15% of the world's population has a disability of some type, roughly 1 billion people. Between Gen X and Gen Z, 19.3 million people here in the United States have a disability. That's between the ages of 21 and 64. If we think about COVID, who's really being affected by that? That age group the most. This is another statement that I hear often. People with disabilities don't use our applications. They don't use our products. That's a very narrow-minded way of thinking, but unfortunately, it's very common because most people approach software development and design thinking that the users will use it the exact same way that they do. When in reality, we all use tech in different ways. You have a different way of opening apps. You have a different way of starting up a particular application. You have a different color scheme for your editor. We all use applications in different ways. Yes, there are some commonalities, but no one is ever 100% the same. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so everyone here is from the Marvel Universe. Then Hulk inverted. All right, so usually when we think about disabilities, this is what we think about. You know, people will picture someone with physical disabilities. We have the two gentlemen on the end who are using ASL to communicate. We have the young lady with prosthetic. We have the young woman here with her dog, and she's walking with a cane. She has visual disabilities. And then we have the gentleman in a wheelchair who has mobility disabilities. But what about the invisibilities? The disabilities that you don't see. Software development is the #1 profession for people with cognitive disabilities. You have coworkers that have not openly said that they have a disability. You probably have a manager that sometimes you think something, you're not thinking quite right. Sometimes it happens. There are reasons, but yes, software development, the #1 job that we have. Cognitive disabilities are the most prevalent disability worldwide. The ones that we don't see: autism, attention deficit, memory loss, dyslexia, just to name a few. Roughly 33 million people in the United States have non-COVID related cognitive disabilities. Then we have this number. 14.5 million people have adult onset ADHD. That means they were diagnosed late in life and are now having to deal with it. I know several people that fit this category. And they've also, contrary to popular belief, they live very successful lives. You know, general consensus is if you have a disability that, you're not doing well or something is definitely wrong with you and you're slower. No, not the case. Not the case at all. So we have to work to change the minds of others, the perception, the negative perception, the stigma that comes along with that. That's why many people don't openly say that they have a disability if it's not something that's visible. You do have a lot of people, like you'll see their Twitter profile, they'll put ADHD or that they're neurodivergent, but that's because they're comfortable doing that. Not everyone is comfortable doing that. I met some people last night at the talk. Some were very open about their neurodivergence. Others, not so much. Then 2020 brings us COVID, and we have symptoms after that called long COVID. In the news, like I said, in the news you'll hear it, it's called brain fog. Early studies showed that depending on the severity of your case, you had a 20 to 70% chance of developing some type of neurological condition afterwards. New data is showing that even if you have a mild case, you didn't even go to the hospital, up to 68% of those people are self-reporting that they have a neurological condition. Something as simple as being forgetful, the brain fog. And I'm going to dig into that more. Ed Young is an author for The Atlantic. This past Monday, he released an article for The Atlantic where he was talking about long COVID and how it is the most misunderstood, but yet the most damaging symptom of all for long COVID. Long haulers is what they like to call them. And one particular person that he interviewed, she described COVID as this: it was worse than having to manage her ADD, her ADHD. Why aren't we talking about this more? Why isn't this being surfaced more if people who already have these comorbidities are struggling in such ways? She was a developer that did AI, and now she struggles with procedural memory problems. Her work suffers because of this, all after COVID. But how? When we first heard about COVID, COVID is a respiratory issue. It's affecting our lungs. Yes, but research showed that COVID actually is neurotropic. Neurotropic means that it can affect our central nervous system. And once it starts to do that, it gets into our brain and it starts to reduce the gray matter. Gray matter is this top layer that you see, and this is where a lot of our neurons happen. This is where all of the thought processes and all the connectivity is happening with the dendrites and the synaptics and so forth. Wow, this graphic. More specifically, the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe handles our executive functions, how we make decisions, how we pay attention, what we choose to pay attention to. Right now, you're choosing to pay attention to me in spite of the noise that you can hear in the hallway. And even though I just mentioned that, for that hot second, you weren't listening to me, but you were more aware of what was going on in the hallway. That's how we shift. More specifically, though, the lateral orbital cortex here. For some reason, the virus likes that particular part of our frontal lobe. This is really interesting. Another part inside the brain, the perihippocampal gyrus, is another area that is affected as well by the virus. Why are these two areas important? Lateral orbital cortex, it manages our attention. It helps with the filtering of the stimuli that we receive. Perihippocampal gyrus helps with our memory, short-term memory, in fact. Spatial memory. Spatial memory is really important when it comes to using devices because we look at the relationship of the UI to figure out how we actually would navigate through. Yes, there are other things that we use, like we process the text that is written on a particular trigger. But how often do you actually find yourself actively reading what is on a UI that you're familiar with, but more muscle memory as you navigate through it? How hard is it to find the tweet button when you want to send a tweet out, whether you're on desktop or on your mobile? You know where it is. You remember where it is. You've built that model. You understand where it is. But you only understand that because of the spatial relationship that it has to the rest of the application. So we'll dig into memory. Working memory. We can only hold about 7 chunks of data. A chunk can be anything from phonetics to numbers. Only 7 at a time. This number is less for young people and older adults. So usually in our prime years, that's when our memory is better. But as we get older, it starts to decline. All right, Gen X to Gen Z. We're at the edge of younger, headed towards the decline. So a lot of people fall into this category. The way that we process information is either structural or phonetic. Structural means that we are encoding the physical characteristics of that particular stimuli that we're receiving. Phonetic, we're encoding the auditory, the sound, the way that you are processing my voice. The shallow processes. In order for us to remember these things, we have to rehearse them. Rehearsing builds up the habit. The habit then forms long-term memory. But if you are coming to an application that you are not familiar with, you have no time to actually rehearse. You are using the application using the understanding of previous websites that you've already gone to, a familiarity. Mental models is what you're building. And then context. Context is very important because how many of us have been in this situation? You have an idea, you're like, oh, I gotta go to the grocery store or I gotta go to any store because I need to buy XYZ. You get there and forget the one thing that you even went to go buy, but you end up getting all this other stuff. Context is important. Usually there is a contextual cue in the environment in which you are that reminds you or triggers the thought. And as soon as you remove yourself from that particular environment or stimuli, there's nothing there to reinforce it. So therefore you forget. Because you only have 7 chunks at a time to remember. And if something else comes in and bumps that out, it's gone. So then in order to remember it, you kind of have to put yourself back in that scenario, back in that environment, back where that stimuli actually exists to try and jog your memory. Then we talk about attention. We see websites like this all the time. I am so tired of going to websites with these paywalls and they just throw tons of ads at you. I just want to read the article and you hit me with all the commercials. I remember when the web was commercial free. It was great. I remember when games were commercial free. Loved it. But this is what we have now. We have all these things popping up in our eyes, in our faces, competing for our attention. And it's annoying. And then when you close it, it's still busy. I closed it and a video of Elton John popped up. Look, why? Elton John had nothing to do with the article, but yet here he is. Tracking ads, just like what Angie was talking about, how these companies own our data and they sit there and they track us and send things that we think we might like or whatnot. I got gaming magazines popping up. Okay, cool. It's still a noisy UI. Things competing for my attention when what's really important to me is the article that's over there. If you are someone that has attention deficit disorder, this is loud. This is very loud, overwhelming at times. Netflix. We all have Netflix. For me, Netflix on a PC is annoying because no matter where your mouse is, as you scroll, your mouse will hit one of these thumbnails and it will pop up. Guess what? I'm not even looking for that. But now this thing is going, hi, I'm here, look at me. And so where I may be here, now my attention for that split second is drawn to what moved. That's annoying. Subtle, but still noisy. This is the application that I work on at Guru. This is our old UI. We're in the process of revamping this whole thing because we've had customers, even though this looks simple, it looks clean. We've had customers say that they don't know what to do with it. They don't know where they should look first. And here it is. We thought we were doing a good job of presenting the data, but no, we weren't. So we're in the process of revamping it. Anybody know what this is? Can y'all read that back there? This is Tailwind. This is what Tailwind looks like in a markup. There are some of us who do not like using Tailwind because Tailwind will clutter, in our opinion, it clutters your markup. Instead of just using a couple of classes, this is a mild example of how verbose the Tailwind utility classes can be. This markup right here builds out lines with a gradient that animate. That's all it does. That's all it does. That's a lot of code for something that can be done with graphics, SVGs, or whatnot. But there are also people who have problems reading it, such as these two gentlemen. First guy, he says he likes it because it manages all the code in one area for him. This guy at the bottom, Gregory, it creates too much noise. From developers that I have spoken with, that's the same sentiment. I met one developer yesterday that said he did not mind it because it puts everything. But from an accessibility standpoint, and going back to the #1 profession for people with disabilities, with cognitive disabilities, if we as project owners, project managers, tech leads are making decisions that can impact our teammates in a negative way, we need to be cognizant of that so that we can start putting our environments together and not only pay attention to the UX of an application, the accessible UX of an application, but also the developer experience for an application. We still need to be mindful of that. A cluttered UI is, as I said before, it's noisy, it's distracting. Mixed content negatively affects your short-term memory. Because your mixed content, you're not able to build the models that you need to because things are mixed up. You have one idea of how something should work on this point and it breaks on the other. And then that takes us into the 7 principles of design. But here I'm going to talk about principle 3. Principle 3, simple and intuitive use. Eliminate unnecessary complexity, be consistent with your user's expectations, and arrange information in a that is consistent and important. Clear purpose. Sumie. Sumie is an art style that is very simple. It uses one color, so to speak, ink. Simple detail. We all look at this and we know that these are fish. We don't need any other detail to be able to understand that these are fish. These are koi specifically. But we can understand it in its simplicity using just ink. Predictable. I mentioned mental models. When things are predictable, they meet our mental models. These are the structures that we have learned to set up in our mind how to use a particular thing. When you walked into this room, you saw the chairs. You knew that you can sit in a chair. I'm looking here using my peripheral. I know he has a camera. I know what that's doing, the mic. We all have these mental models of how we can interact with our environment. CAG 3.2 states that we should make web pages appear and operate in predictable ways. Jacob Nielsen, he says that contrary to popular belief, people don't spend a lot of time on your website. They're using other people's websites. And when they come to visit your website, they are using it in a manner that they've gleaned from other websites. So if someone went to another website before they came to yours, they understand how that link looks or how that button is supposed to work or what this modal does or where this close button should be. So when we have designers that decide to break the norms, they create friction points in the UI because they've gone against common practices and mental models. So if you ever hear anyone complaining about struggling getting through your UI, you may want to look at how far do you deviate from these mental models, from how other websites work. Case in point, buttons and links. If I were to take the label off, they would look exactly the same. But we have developers still to this day that don't know the appropriate time to use a button, semantic button, or semantic link. But it plays a big part, especially for individuals who use screen readers. Because screen readers have different browse modes. Those browse modes change based on the type of element that you are interacting with. Buttons are expected to behave in one way, links are expected to behave in another. That is a mental model. That is a habit that someone understands and has, an expectation. So if you throw a link where a button should be, it's going to confuse some users, or vice versa. Buttons perform an action, links change the URL. If your URL changes at all, it should be a link. Now, there is an argument of you shouldn't style links to look like buttons. I also have a design background. I understand why it's done. Sometimes it's to benefit the design, but your developers should understand the difference between when to use one versus the other. Todd, the guy that walked in, big guy that walked in that left earlier, just came and said good luck. He sent me this site. It caught me off guard. Yes, okay. I was expecting the navigation to drop down. When I went to the other link next to it, it went up and pushed the entire site down. Didn't meet my expectation. How much longer? 5 minutes? Okay, easy. This was an issue we had on our website. Yeah, that was a UI issue that we had. This one is a text issue. We weren't consistent in our content. This broke people's expectations. We actually got complaints on this because when you went to knowledge, you didn't expect to see collections because knowledge and collections, they're not synonymous. So we ended up changing it all to collections. Errors went away. The UI of our favorite video sites. This is Netflix, the play button. Apple, where's the play button? Or now, this is Apple. Play button's there. We're used to where the play button should be. Throughout these three services, if you use either one of them, you know how to navigate. You know how to start the movie or show that you want to watch, which brings us into wayfinding. The perihippocampal gyrus, spatial memory, if that's affected, it's going to affect the way that we navigate and visualize applications. Who's familiar with heat maps? This is a heat map. Heat maps show the fixation points of where someone is looking at your UI. If you have a heat map where the fixation points are tightly grouped together, that means your information is easy to find. They know where they need to go. But if it's scattered like it is in this image, they're not sure where to go. They don't know where to focus on. So they're scanning the entire page for what's relevant to them. So we have to be mindful of not only how our information is structured, but even how we design it. Because if we design with too much white space, we lose edge detection. Edge detection helps individuals with low vision and even sighted users determine where they need to be, set the relationship boundaries between the UI elements that they will use to navigate. It goes back to the Twitter example that I gave where you know where the tweet button is. You don't have to search the UI. You know where it is in relation to the rest of the UI. And the tolerance for error. 45% of those pages that were scanned in the 1 million survey, of that, 4.4 million had issues with their form labels. Form labels help users navigate and understand what it is that they need to do with the form. What you don't want to do is just have an input just floating out there. Looks like this. We've all seen this. And then as soon as you focus on it, it looks like that. Well, exactly. If you have short-term memory loss or you get distracted and you have long COVID, and remember, that's hard to manage, it's difficult to manage. You just came here, now it's like, okay, what do I do? Imagine an entire form like this. You're lost for it a hot second. What we want to do is use explicit labels. You have the label associated with the input. Now it looks like this, so that when you come there, if they focus on it, they still understand what it is that they have to put in there. Reduce the number of errors. Errors cause frustration. Frustration causes someone to close the browser and never use your application again. This is another one. Designers love to remove the outline from around focusable elements, not knowing that the focusable element plays a part in wayfinding because it allows keyboard users and anyone else to understand where they are in relationship to the UI when you're not using a mouse. Focusable. Unfocused and in focus. You can use CSS. I love that argument. Well, it looks ugly. Guess what? We can use CSS to style it so that it's on brand. I did that when I started working. This was one of the first issues that I tackled when I started at Guru. Now our designers, when they see a UI that doesn't have a focusable ring, it annoys them because they understand the benefits of it now. Errors on forms. Make sure that the errors are in the right place. How do I know where this? There are validation errors. Thanks, you didn't tell me anything. This should be red, but you get the point. Form elements should have the error message associated with the element itself so that individuals understand where they need to go to fix the particular issue. All with wayfinding. So anyone who has spatial memory issues, recognition, this helps them navigate through, which does what? Reduces their frustration and increases their UX. Good design is invisible, but it's easy to see the issues inside of it. And so we have this quote by Don Norman. The Design of Everything or Everyday Things is a book that he wrote. Good design is actually a lot harder to notice than poor design, in part because good designs fit our needs so well that the design is invisible. When we take the time, show empathy and mindfulness in how we craft our applications, the UI, the user experience, not paying attention to just the mouse user experience, but other modes of input that someone else may use to access our application, navigate our product, we'll make everything much better. We'll make everyone's lives much better. And with the way that COVID has negatively impacted our lives, and it's not going away anytime soon, this is a lifetime thing. We have to be mindful of this and try to do better and convince those around us to also do better. Thank you very much. If you're still interested in accessibility talks, there are two that are happening later today that are really good from Christiana and Jay. Jay would be doing a deeper dive into neurodivergence and the help that is provided for especially developers who are neurodivergent. So he was one of the gentlemen that I met last night who actually is neurodivergent, openly neurodivergent, and does not have a problem talking about it. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.